I woke up naked in a cage barely big enough to sit up in. There was a half-eaten bowl of kibble to my right and I had clearly slept with my head in my water bowl but thankfully spilled enough to avoid drowning. Then again, I am aware shock, maybe I did drown but kept healing until it was all gone. It doesn't really matter. I groaned. A familiar voice asked, "Has he woken?" Then a pair of legs approached my cage and I said, "Excuse me, would someone kindly explain what the fuck is going on?" "Yeah," said a different familiar voice. "Get Egret." Then I heard footsteps and running. The bars of my cage were rattled and the different familiar voice said, "So, you're a pet now, huh? Well, that makes things a bit complicated." Then more footsteps. A loud voice that I knew incredibly well said, "Get back, he needs space, he'll be in shock." Footsteps again. The door to my cage was opened and a firm hand gripped my neck and secured something. "There. Steve, follow my lead, I will explain everything." The hand went away and I felt myself pulled, so I crawled in the direction of the pulling. "How much do you remember of last night?" asked the voice. "Well, I remember I was going to ask you something, then you invited me to dinner and I trailed off and sighed. I ate Lisa and I liked it." "And what?" I asked. "What do you remember after that?" I frowned as I struggled to remember. "You whispered something to me and I liked it, you started massaging me." I shot to my feet suddenly as realization dawned. I glared at Egret. "You drugged me." I saw now that Lucy and Amy were also in the room, fully dressed and looking nervously at me. "No," said Egret calmly. "Then how?" I asked. Lucy shrugged. "Self-blood." I looked to her. Lucy explained. "It keeps you sane the way it keeps me and Lisa and the others sane. The third way cancels out the first, the submissiveness cancels out the desire to dominate. You've not imprinted on anyone, but that doesn't mean you're not going to respond to the same stimuli, that you're not going to bliss out." "Oh," I said. I felt rather foolish. Egret asked, "What were you going to ask me?" "If you would drug me," I said with a laugh. "Yes," Egret said sweetly. "But for now get dressed and take your girls home. I will come for you." I did not say no. Lisa and Carla naturally spent the day enjoying each other. Even Lucy and Amy spent the day in each other's company, but I felt alone. I tried to ignore it. Tried to watch Netflix, to experiment with the quantum oscillator and memory gun, but I just couldn't shake the feeling like part of my soul was missing. Then Egret came for me. It was much like last time, only Egret had actually removed Lisa's arms and legs before putting her in the stew. She had put them in the temporal freezer so that she could remove Lisa's arms and legs again and deep fry them all at once. Lisa's ribs were removed to be barbecued and her lungs, kidneys and liver pureed with herbs and spices to make sausages. This approach was not as involved and painful as Lisa usually liked, so Egret sliced off one of her ears and that seemed to satisfy the masochistic girl. I do not feel ashamed for liking the deep fry for two important reasons. 1. It tasted fantastic, and unlike a regular deep fry the portion sizes were hilariously huge. 2. Deep-fried fast food chains are famously atrocious when it comes to the breeding, rearing and slaughtering of their meat animals. True, this was a post-scarcity society where deep fry without the torture was possible, but compared to all the deep fry I had eaten in the past I felt reasonably confident that this was by far the most ethically sourced, as indeed I could be certain of seeing their meat donor in full health tomorrow. Then Carla was put back in her toy box and Egret returned with a small engagement ring box. She went down on one knee and opened the box to reveal a small white pill that looked not unlike a mint imperial. "Will you, Stephen Banks, please consent to be my lawfully recognized pet sylph?" I laughed and lifted the pill, then paused with it before my lips. "This is legally recognized?" Egret nodded and got to her feet again. "Helps the elder gods and their followers know you're taken. Legally speaking, you will be treated as sapient pet under my and my husband's charge. You'll still have your human rights, You'll just have a whole load of extra sylph rights intended to protect you since you'll be so easily exploitable. I glared at her. Nobody mentioned this? Egret snorted. Be thankful you're just my pet. That toys quite literally surrender their rights and become illegal property, hence how they can be bought and sold. I stared at her for a long moment, then shrugged and swallowed it. I looked her in the eyes and said, Egret, I hereby give my consent to be your lawfully recognized pet sylph. And then I felt weird. I looked at Egret and saw the mad dominating woman I considered an easy and experienced pick for mistress if I was to be a pet, but I was also now seeing, no, feeling, Egret, my protector, my commander, my mistress, my god. Then she stroked me. It was like fireworks going off as electrochemical signals rushed through my body to let me know that this was a fucking fantastic sensation. Oh, I said enthusiastically. That felt good. Egret grinned and tickled me under my chin. I found myself marveling at her as I felt a sudden overriding love for her. Follow me, there's a good boy, she said as she took me by the hand. I woke up naked in the cage again, but this time I was fully aware of what was going on and had showered and dressed by the time Egret arrived to check up on me. So how do you feel? She asked. I grinned and said, it's hard to describe accurately, but fucking fantastic will suffice. Egret grinned and cleared the hair from my face. I know you're my pet and I accept full responsibility for you in that regard, but I also know that you only said yes because you need to be someone's pet to counteract the were-shark madness, so don't feel like you owe me anything. I nodded. Thank you. She stroked the hair at the back of my head and I could see her weighing up her options. I was now hers in a most profound way, and she was clearly tempted by the idea of reducing me to pup in her arms again, but instead she tickled my chin and said, go, be with your girls. Be a human again. So I did. The were-shark blood gave me some measure of protection from the obedience of a sylph, but when your master or mistress offers such a command while priming you with the gestures of friendly control, it is very hard not to do as they ask. Especially when that is what you'd really rather like to do anyway. Lisa was noticeably interested in my new state as pet and rather implored me to join her and Carla in a threesome, but I politely refused. I knew where my future lay now. I studied up about segats and quantum oscillators. To the point where Lucy had to physically jostle me so I'd notice when she came to say goodbye as she and Amy went over to Anthony's to bliss out. It was odd looking at my dear pet and knowing exactly how she felt when my massaging caused her to become a less sapient creature of instinct. It made me love her more in a way, since the doubts at the back of my mind vanished and I understood why this was a lifestyle she wished to indulge in. To her it must be like moving to heaven from hell. Lucy's life had been war, the worst and highest stakes kind of war. The original Lucy had grown up fighting robots, spent an age walking the parallel Earths helping to lead the fight back on what would become the united civilizations of the multiverse, been burned alive by the great farsh-nuke, and also she would be physically and mentally able to command every battlefield in the war against the septagonoids. A woman who had suffered her entire life and then turned into a weapon by one horrible man. Then she sacrificed herself to the Contravoxai for a different, better man and endured being eaten alive day in, day out, for over 100 years. Now her life was friendship, puppy love and fucking with another sylph, who did not share her scars, and the euphoric surrender of pethood to a kind owner. I envied her the simple joy and happiness this life seemed to bring her, but of course that's why all broken men keep naive optimists about them. They are a lighthouse in dark times, letting even the most jaded and cynical of people understand that there was truly something wrong. You see, I was safe now. I was cured. I had a kind of new family again. I even had the reassurance that my race was not dead. Humanity persists across the multiverse no matter what the Contravoxai do. My culture and civilization lived on and I could start again. Start afresh. Become a citizen of Choice World. A refugee from alien lands come to make the world a brighter place. Except that in Choice World, in the multiverse, one man really could make a difference and I had unfinished business to attend to, so I started planning something big, but before I acted on this plan I wanted to talk to Anthony. I wanted to get some answers. "Does it feel weird?" asked Anthony when we began walking our sylphs that weekend. "Knowing that as part owner I could just as easily be walking you?" I laughed and admired the beauty of Choice World, then said, "Anthony, if you want to walk me you have only to bliss me out, but I am afraid I have long since passed the merely weird." "Fair point," said Anthony with a smile. "Well, for what it's worth, I'm glad you decided to become mine and Egret's pet. You make her very happy and it seems Sammy went to a lot of effort to get you to me. It only feels right to have you under my care and welcome you into the family. Plus it makes me feel less of a sexist bigot." I snorted and said, "I have drunk the freshly spilled blood of a woman I keep as a pet and eaten the flesh of another I call friend. I think I rather trump you on the pissing off feminists front." Anthony chuckled. "You actually ate Lisa, eh? Well, I suppose it was only a matter of time. That girl's the chosen plaything of the Bamkerj. You know, even the toy you can buy in shops likes to have her head cut off and her internal organs dissected. You ever entertain that whimsy of hers?" I asked curiously. "No," said Anthony pointedly. "However, Egret will insist that we spend at least one day a month as sharks, and on those occasions the toys are asked to strap vat-grown stakes to their backs and frolic at the surface waiting for us to strike and pull them under. Lisa seems to take particular enjoyment, so I have noticed Egret will often experiment with the most savage of attacks against her." I couldn't help but laugh at that, then said, "We're going to hell, aren't we?" "Good thing we're immortal then," said Anthony with a wry smile before he added more seriously, "They like it, Stephen. It utterly baffles me and causes me no end of worry, but they like it, and God's help me, but I think I like that they like it too." "Yeah," I said as I watched Lucy pause to sniff a turd in the road that I prayed had been made by a dog. "I've noticed that too. It feels wrong in my bones, but they look so happy. How can you not find it adorable?" Anthony chuckled. "I saw Amy try to take advantage of Lucy's distractedness and try to take her from behind. Lucy turned at this and started trying to kiss Amy. At this point Amy kissed Lucy, then strode on, leaving Lucy to bound after her. The absurd display of puppy love reminded me of my purpose here today, so I asked, "What can you tell me of Sammy?" Anthony thought for a moment, then asked, "Do you know how me and Egret met?" I shook my head. "Well, I was approached by a man. He called himself the Sly CK. I could swear he had stepped right out of my dreams. He said he founded Choice World, that he very carefully controlled the immigration so that there would be plenty of willing submissives for passing vampires, elder gods and logicios to take advantage of. This whole place was intended as a honeypot to attract the great and powerful of the multiverse and convince them to settle down," explained Anthony carefully. He explained in essence that Choice World was not intended as a utopia for its citizens. It was intended as an ark for the great and the powerful. "An ark? As in Noah? Why?" I asked. "Because, as he explained it, if and, God willing, when the great septagonoid war is over and the logicios are given sufficient a bloody nose to stop being so sadistic, sexist and amoral, and the Bamkersh's attempt at playing Napoleon is quashed and all the Lucys have been quietly rounded up and retired, something, is going to have to rebuild multiversal civilization," said Anthony. I nodded thoughtfully. "So this is like the Library of Alexandria, a record of civilization from before the world erupted in war?" "No," said Anthony with a frown. "It's more like the Vatican, a strange little nation-state with pretensions to godlike power whose job is to keep civilization going after the great empires fall by providing the necessary education the leaders of the new world will need to not completely fuck it up and keep it vaguely moving in the right direction." "Interesting," I said dismissively. "But what does this have to do with Sammy, or indeed Egret?" Anthony smiled apologetically, then explained. "This man could do all this and keep control because he had a power that let him be practically omnipotent and omniscient, but, like Rome, the larger his little empire got, the harder it became to keep track of. So he had been looking for a junior partner to share the burden with. Someone who could make the hard choices and would do whatever it took to achieve the goals set to him, and someone who, no matter how often he crossed the line, would still try to be moral. "He chose you?" I said. "Indeed," said Anthony as he looked at his left hand as if remembering some long-since faded scar. "I would be able to control the very subatomic particles and logic of my being. I am what is technically known as a liquidator because I can alter myself to become the four states of matter at will, and I can become so at one with the matter of something that I can phase through it. I can make clones of myself at a whim, absorb entire planets into myself and, yes, even possess and absorb people's minds so I can replicate them too." "Wow," I said, impressed. "Suddenly Superman looks pretty darn pedestrian." Anthony nodded. "With great power comes great responsibility, and I had one hell of a responsibility to consider. I would be sheriff of Choice World, the protector of the core universes. Except I'm a smart man with a self-loathing problem. I needed convincing, and how do you pay a man to accept that much responsibility when he is living in a utopia? I had a small harem of toys around me, I was already as immortal as you, and I had a Segat that I knew how to use. I did not need anything he could give me. So he offered to pay me with my heart's greatest desire. He could scan my soul and mind for the woman who would be perfect for me and provide me with her location." "And that was Egret?" I said. "No," said Anthony with a laugh. "I wrote the coordinates down wrong. Ended up turning up at this Charichthy's place, a great cyborg shark. And I was thinking, well, this is wrong, this can't be. Only, when you move to Choice World, its inhabitants are scanned as matches for you, and things are narrowed down to a point where the prospective personalities can have their minds simulated by artificial intelligence, and volunteers are asked for. The chosen volunteer mind is then incarnated Roma scan taken when the person first immigrated to Choice World, so this fresh copy might be given as a welcome gift to the new citizen of Choice World. This Charichthy had received a copy of me as a welcome gift." I chuckled at that. "So you asked your future wife out because a copy of you was given to her as a pet?" Anthony nodded. He was quite charming about the whole thing really, got himself scooped up by a down on his luck logitio and let Egret use his becoming a sylph to allow her to become a were-shark without the madness or submissiveness. I check on him every now and again. He seems very happy. Traveling the multiverse, righting wrongs with his master. I gather it's a very loving relationship, and as for me and Egret, well, she loves me for the monstrous predator I have always feared I am or could be. "That's very sweet, in a weird fucked up sort of way," I said with a smile. Anthony blushed. Of course, when it came time for our wedding, the slick decided to clear up the confusion, and while he was very happy for us, he brought along my actual payment as a wedding gift. She thought she was his +1 and was rather confused as to why this strange man had brought her along to this wedding. "That was Sammy?" I asked. Anthony nodded. "My perfect woman, perfect human woman anyway, was a girl who had a happy childhood, even enjoyed her time at school, college and university, and even landed a good job, and yet, despite everything going so very well for her and her being so very happy with her life, the slick assured me that she would very much like it if I were to walk up her and make her mine, and he was right. He was so right that she had my Segat clone her so her clone might climb onto the great leader's dinner plate, become that me's pet sylph and were shark and be eaten alive by the great leader along with that me. So that's how? That's how the woman who saved your life came to be in such a position," said Anthony with a nod. "I am rather afraid I was worried for her, so I found Carla that first night I had convinced her to be my toy. The night after I had first encountered and been eaten by the Contravoxai, I cloned her and explained the situation to the clone, so she climbed up onto the great leader's dinner plate as well. That was when the Baumkirche decided to send one of her still human Lisas up onto the stage." "And Amy?" I asked, out of curiosity. Anthony smiled at the memory. Egret revealed on our honeymoon that she had tracked down the original Amy and she intended for her to be our new toy so that, in her words, I would not be left wondering about the girl who had been chosen as my welcome gift. Amy was utterly on board with this amazingly and even consented when Egret suggested we consecrate the sanctity and certainty of our marriage with a threesome. I did try to disagree. Then in the morning when Amy was skimming through the papers that would make her our legal property, Egret pulled Sammy out of storage so they could get acquainted, and Sammy somehow talked Amy into having herself cloned so the clone could join me, Sammy, Lucy, Lisa and Carla on the great leader's dinner plate. I chuckled. Sounds like a great, if ridiculous, wedding. Anthony chuckled himself. Yes, for our honeymoon retreat she'd rented out a gorgeous desert island and had the local vampires recruit a small army's worth of gorgeous women who were willing to fill out the necessary legal paperwork and get the necessary injections such that they would all be our toys and therefore functionally immortal. The women were instructed to get drunk, have sex and generally have as much fun as possible before enjoying the beautiful blue waters in which me and Egret hunted. It was a kind of game, competing to see who could reach the highest and drag the most toys down to our chalet in a cave deep underwater. We tried to let the survivors of our little game go, but they were very resistant to the idea, so into the packing crates they went. What happened to them? I asked. Oh, I gave about half of them away to various friends, organizations and charity auctions over the years. Always with their permission, of course, said Anthony casually. I think most of them are still on display somewhere, awaiting the day I need them, but Egret still has a few that she regularly uses for breaching practice. You'd have to ask her. I nodded. Fair enough. The conversation dried up and Anthony said, the girls are getting tired, I think we should back, why don't you come to mine? Egret can bliss you out and you can enjoy the dubious delights of your friend's flesh again. I snorted and followed Anthony's suggestion. We walked back in relative silence, but there was one question hanging between us. How could it not? Things had been so happy for Anthony back in the day. This Egret had clearly allowed him to enjoy things he would never otherwise have allowed himself to enjoy, and all had seemed perfectly okay with this. So what changed? What made the man who casually accepted 2 women as gifts on his wedding day and hunted women as sport on his honeymoon suddenly decide to spend his days quietly reading and walking his sylphs while the majority of his toys were left frozen, their minds turned off? Lisa today was stuffed with onions and herbs, then roasted before being presented to the table like a Christmas turkey and carved up for the dinner plate. Again this proved a bit pedestrian for Lisa's liking, and when slicing off her ears and pan-frying them didn't satisfy her, she'd pulled out her eyes and ate them like Brussels sprouts. This seemed to settle Lisa's mind to rest that she was being suitably taken advantage of, so the eating was allowed to begin. However, Egret was so rattled by Lisa's obstinacy with regards to her cooking that she started stroking and massaging me before I had even taken a single bite, and I somewhat regrettably blissed out before I could. I woke the next day naked besides Egret as she watched a sharkploitation film. Seeing that I was awake, Egret hurriedly turned the volume down on the TV. Sorry, did I wake you? I shrugged. Egret stroked my cheek idly and said, sorry about last night. I blissed you out too early, didn't I? No, didn't. I smirked. Well, I was rather interested how someone roasted alive tastes now that you mention it, but it is probably a good idea that I stop with the cannibalism. Egret squeezed me and said, there's some cold in the fridge if you're still interested. I just got so angry with her. My Lisa's been properly tamed by the Bamkerj, this one is very demanding and I just can't make her happy anymore. She needs a Contravoxai. I nodded and nuzzled Egret. I have been thinking about that actually. Well, don't hold back on my account, said Egret gently. If you've got any ideas about how to help her, act on them. Will you miss me? I asked seriously. She smiled sadly. Oh, Steve, I barely know you and I've got more than enough toys to keep me busy, if His Royal Highness would let me, that is. Now go on, I've kept you long enough, your clothes are in the shower room. I stepped out of the shower in my suit and found Anthony talking with Ygritte. "Come on, boy," he said. "I think I owe you an explanation." He led me down long corridors to a hidden door locked with 7 different keys. Anthony placed his hand against the locks, arranged like the points on a septagon, then there was a click as the door sprang open. I strode in and saw arranged along the left and right of the hallway a series of statues. There was one of Anthony, one of some gruff guy with a beard, one of some short blonde woman with spectacles and then one of Sammy. "This is where I keep her," explained Anthony gravely. "I call it my Hall of Heroes. To the casual observer it will just look like a fancy display of the more recent Bamkirsch toys." "You're a toy?" I asked incredulously. "The Bamkirsch cloned me before I joined Choice World when I had so little left to live for. And she's good," said Anthony simply. I nodded, satisfied, and went to examine Sammy. "This is really her?" I asked. Anthony seemed to falter, then said, "Sammy. She died. She died, Stephen." "How?" I asked. "Septagonoid logical void gun. Not even the elder gods can survive a dire CT hit from one of them," said Anthony. He stared at the statue of Sammy and stroked her cheek. It gave beneath his fingers like real flesh. I always wondered why the Doctor travels alone. I suppose I watched too much of The Arrow. I thought fighting crime could be a team effort, despite how much more powerful I am compared to everybody else, and bless her, she was so keen, always running into danger by my side, and most of the time she was fine. I mean, I've had recover her body parts from the bottom of the ocean and deep space before, but she could always be pieced back together and allowed to heal. "I'm sorry," I said awkwardly. "But I have to ask, what was a septagonoid doing here?" "Living," he said sadly. "Just living. Choice World is the one place in the entire multiverse where septagonoids are allowed to be people, just so long as they keep the whole trying to end the multiverse hobby on the back burner. It's why it's so safe. Even the great enemies of the multiverse respect Choice World as a safe haven of peace and tranquility." "Then what happened?" I asked. "We were taking out an arms dealer who was kidnapping citizens off the street to turn them into biomechanical weapons. We needed the best weapon to counter it. We needed a septagonoid. I was able to bring one round and convince it to work with us. Then Frederick tried his luck. Nothing would please the sick fuck more than turning the great scourge of the multiverse into his little toy, but the septagonoid wasn't having it and things got heated, so she lashed out and Frederick ducked. The bolt vaporized Sammy's heart, brain and soul," explained Anthony. He turned to me, tears in his eyes. "I tried to save her. I always back up every girl's memories before we go out on a trip anyway, just in case, and I always kept a spare of Sammy on the off chance, so I was able to copy the spare's soul and fuse it with what was left of her body. In time she healed and I gave her the latest set of memories. She looked me in the eyes and was so fucking cheery, ready to go out to battle again. Oh well, my soul was vaporized and I'm a Frankenstein's monster of soul, memories and flesh, but still I live, so no harm done, eh? And I just couldn't take it. I had saved her, yet I also knew I'd lost her and I didn't want to lose her ever again.